Good morning, Happy Valley, and welcome back to another edition of the Good Morning Happy Valley podcast, sponsored by PennState.Rivals.com, aka Happy Valley Insider. I'm Richie Schnyderite, your publisher of Happy Valley Insider. Once again, joined by our wrestling analyst. Geez, I'm struggling today. Joey Klender. Joe, what's going on, man?
I'm hanging in there, man. How you doing?
I'm good. So we got some wrestling news again. That's 2 weeks in a row. It's pretty significant for the off season.
We do, yeah. Schedule finally came out, so there's some takeaways from it. It's a little strange this year, but
yeah.
It's pretty solid.
Let's jump right into it. Big Ten champs last year, Big Ten regular season champs, NCAA champs, blah blah blah, 16-0. Typical Penn State wrestling here. But what do you think of this schedule overall? I know there's a couple of weird things on here actually.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty solid schedule all in all. It's nice to have a couple cool matches at home. Ohio State, Rutgers is going to be a good one, but that's one of the weird ones on a Monday night at the Jordan Center. So that'll be an interesting one, I guess. We looked at the schedule a little bit for the Jordan Center. It didn't seem like there was too much going on, but it's surprising that they're not going with Ohio State in there. But I'm actually really excited for that because I think that we should wrestle the stronger opponents in Rec Hall. I think it's just an environmental thing. A lot of people who are fans of the team more recently haven't gotten a chance to see a really strong team in Rec Hall because usually those duels are reserved for the Jordan Center. So yeah, Ohio State and Rec Hall will be good. Nebraska, Edinburgh's a cool Pennsylvania team that Penn State will wrestle this year. So yeah, I mean, it's a pretty solid schedule, but there's some changes from the last few years, obviously, but it seems like it's going to be a good year.
All right, let's just go through it one by one. Let's just start off. They're going to start off with the Journeyman Collegiate Classic over in Bethlehem. Just overall thoughts on that. I know they do it quite a bit, it seems like.
Yeah, they announced that they were going to do that this year. It's a pretty cool event. It'll give Penn State some looks at some different schools. Just looking at the list here: NC State, Arizona State, Lehigh, Purdue, Harvard, Penn, Cornell, Lock Haven, and then some other teams that aren't on that Division I level. Pitt Johnstown, that's one kind of close to me, and Division II school. But I think it's just a good way to kick the year off and get some momentum going into the season. The following week you got the Black Knight invite. They wrestled in that last year, and
yeah, they won it, I believe, right?
Yes, I believe so. Yeah. So, I mean, it's nice to have those two kind of just early season tournaments, and it gives some people an opportunity to see the team. And obviously Bethlehem's not too far from State College, but people drive a lot further to come to Rec Hall. But it's just cool to give people an opportunity to see the team. Same with the West Point Army invite. So
of course, I think last year the Black Knight invite had what, like 7 teams, 6 teams, something like that. Maybe more. It might be more. It was
pretty solid, actually.
Yeah, I'm looking now. Buffalo, Brown, Bloomsburg, Campbell, Central Michigan, Columbia, Hofstra, Indiana, and Penn State. Damn, yeah, that was actually a bigger tournament than I thought for Army.
And another thing is it really brings some attention to the other schools that are maybe not as notable and stuff like that. Like, looking at this lineup without going too far forward, Oregon State's on the schedule for January away. That's really going to bring some good exposure to that program. They haven't had too many notable wrestlers in the past few years. I mean, they've had a couple, but that's a program that seems maybe to be financially struggling, and getting Penn State in there and maybe some other notable teams in there. It's just good for the program. It's almost notable that Penn State's doing something like that, just because wrestling is, we almost watched Stanford a couple years ago lose a wrestling program, and that was a wrestling program that had a national champion the year before that they were considering getting rid of it. So it's good to bring awareness to these teams that are maybe struggling for finances and stuff like that. So
yeah,
good move.
The other thing I want to talk about in November before we move on to December, the NWCA All-Star Classic. I know for people that don't know, it seems like there's a lot of big names last year. Like I see Iowa had a couple guys, Minnesota, Ohio State, etc.
Yeah. That's another cool event that's really had some good matchups over the years. David Taylor and Kyle Dake actually wrestled in that. Last year we had Carter Starachi, who took on Makai Lewis from Virginia Tech, who is pretty notable because he took out Chenzo the 1 year in the
Mm-hmm.
finals. Kirk wrestled Cassioppi, which was big. Kirk had a couple really good matches against Cassioppi last year. Aaron Brooks was in it. There was just a lot of really good matchups at it last year, but I'd imagine there'll probably be a couple big names from Penn State.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not too sure how Kale feels about the exhibition matches. Obviously, last year he sent some big names, but you want to stay healthy and stuff like that. So I don't imagine Brooks or Srirachi being there this year. Probably not Kirk, just because they're seniors. I think Kale's going to want to keep them reserved and keep them healthy and just try to avoid any risk with them at all. So, but I guess we'll see. I'd like to see Bo Bartlett at it. He's a pretty big name, especially on social media and stuff now too. So,
yeah,
I think he would be probably a pretty good attraction for the event.
Of course. Then looking in December, you got back-to-back Sundays between Lehigh and Hofstra, both coming to Rec Hall. I think just give me your thoughts on that. I know Lehigh obviously in state, but Hofstra.
Yeah. Lehigh's been a good duel in the past. It's almost like tradition for Penn State to wrestle them once a year. I feel like they do wrestle them every year. Hofstra's a little interesting. I don't see that duel being very close. That could be a 10-match to 0. It's just as solid as Penn State's lineup is. It's not a knock at Hofstra. It's just, I would have liked to see Penn State maybe wrestle somebody like Penn, maybe University of Pittsburgh, something like that. But once again, early in the year, you don't get to the meat of the schedule till January and February, so it makes sense to wrestle somebody like that.
Of course. And then they wrap up out of conference stuff with Oregon State. Out in Oregon State, I know you just mentioned it. You talked about it a little bit. Oregon State, like you said, they're going to go out there. They're going to try to show some love to the West Coast. But they don't really have. They might not have a conference next year, so it's kind of a weird one.
Yeah, this whole conference scramble up is going to make things interesting for sure. But like I said, I'm really excited for Penn State to get out there and just kind of bring some exposure to the Oregon State program. I think that's going to be a good move on their part. And, just previously mentioning the Stanford thing, it's a good move. Need to keep as many schools, especially with some schools expanding with women's like Iowa.
True.
It'd be a shame to lose, a D1 wrestling program that's had some good names in the past 10 years, past 15 years. There's been a lot of good kids who come out of Oregon State. So,
yeah, of course. And there's a couple from the West Coast and Southwest on the roster, so it makes sense.
Absolutely.
Even though jumping right into it, Indiana, Michigan State, Maryland, Indiana Rec Hall, then away against Michigan State and Maryland. Just running through them. Give me your thoughts on those 4 real quick.
Obviously, all Big Ten duels, so that'll be good. It'd be interesting for them to get to Maryland because Big Ten tournament will be there this year. Michigan State's obviously always a pretty solid duel. But I am excited to see Maryland. I was born in Baltimore, so that's kind of neat to see them wrestling Maryland. And it's nice to see Maryland in the Big Ten. I know they've been in the conference for a few years, but it'd be good for them to get down to College Park and wrestle the Terps.
Yeah, true. Now just going through it, we don't see losses in any of these 5, right?
No, I don't see
any of them.
I don't see too many threatening matches. Ohio State and Iowa probably going to be the 2 closest ones. Rutgers has a hell of a lineup this year as well. I do not see Penn State losing a duel this year. I don't see very many being close.
Yeah, of course.
It's Penn State's also so solid with bonus points. So even if it is like a 5-5 and get, you go halvesies on the matches and the duels, I just don't see things being very close.
Yeah, of course. Now we talked about it before, but Rutgers is at Bryce Jordan Center on a Monday night, Monday. Yeah. We don't know if it's Monday night, but probably Monday night, I guess. Just very odd matchup. Now I know you mentioned like you like it better for like Ohio State saying at Rec Hall or like a bigger name at Rec Hall. Do you think this is kind of like just a diss to like an OSU or a diss to someone else saying like, hey, we're going to put Rutgers here instead? Or you think Rutgers is actually like competitive this year?
I think that maybe it's just a nod to Rutgers. I don't think it's necessarily a diss to Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Ohio State's been a very strong team for a very long time, and I know that Kale and Tom Ryan have a lot of respect for each other. Those teams have a lot of respect for each other.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see it being an underhanded thing. Just don't think Penn State's really like that. Who knows? But Rutgers is not a team to, it's not a team to just, pass by in your thoughts. They have a lot of solid kids. There's a lot of decent matchups there in that duel. I also think that could be a scheduling thing. I'm not to speculate, but Ohio State just maybe couldn't get to State College on a night where, the Jordan Center was open. So, but like I said, I think that these bigger duels sometimes need to be in Rec Hall. I don't think they need to be in the Jordan Center all the time. That's just my personal opinion. Rec Hall is such a better atmosphere. It's much more intimate. It's smaller, of course, which kind of makes it stinky for people that want to see a big matchup like that.
Yep.
But I'm thinking about 5 years ago when Penn State wrestled Ohio State in Rec Hall, and it was the biggest wrestling match in the history of wrestling. It was, Nolf was hurt, but it was just solid lineups. It was Mark Hall and Bo Jordan, and it was, I can't even think of some of the matches off the top of my head, but Nick Neville's had to just avoid a major from Kyle Snyder for us to seal the duel with a weaker lineup than what they had. So, and that was one of the best duels I've been to. The only one I can think of that's even remotely comparable is probably 2012 versus Iowa was pretty good. That was the first time we had beaten Iowa and beat them in Rec Hall, and it was the first time we beat Iowa in a long time. But I think that Rec Hall needs to have its due. It needs those strong matches sometimes. But I also think that Jersey's pretty big for wrestling. It's not that far away. People are going to make the drive. Maybe they just wanted to fill up the Jordan Center with some Rutgers fans this year. But the Monday night thing, you lost me there.
Yeah.
I have no idea. That's going to be strange. I don't know what the reasoning is for it. Like we said, we speculated that it might be a scheduling change, but I don't know if I see that duel getting sold out with just the timing. And it is Rutgers. It's not Ohio State. It's not Michigan. It's not Iowa. So I don't know. I think we'll see, but I don't see that duel doing the numbers that the ones in the past have, just because of the time, the day, and the opponent. Yeah,
I mean Monday night, middle of February. Not the best weather in the world either. So
that's true too. And school's on top of a mountain, so
it doesn't help. So
no.
Anyway, Big Ten championships. I'm just going to skip over Nebraska and Edinburgh. I don't feel like we really need to talk about them too much, but. Big Ten championships, like you said, College Park, Maryland. How many Big Ten champs you think they get this year?
I'm going to say Nagel wins one. I'm going to say Bartlett wins one. I'm going to say Van Ness wins one. Haynes probably wins one. 65 is where things get interesting because I am still very up in the air who's going to have 65 for the postseason.
Yeah.
Facundo he's solid, but he had a disappointing year last year. And Mitch Mesenbrink, man, he is going to be trouble. Where that leaves us for the future, who knows? But I could see one of them being a Big Ten champion, but I'm not going to count that one just because I'm not even sure who will be there in the postseason.
Of course, yeah.
Starachi's going to win one, and Brooks will win one. Kirk's going to have his hands full, but like I said, I made a bold prediction. I think he wins nationals. I do not think he wins Big Tens, but I'm seeing 1 with Nagel, 2 with Bartlett, 3 with Van Ness, 4 with Haynes, 5 with Starachi, and 6 with Brooks.
Gotcha.
So
I'm
thinking 6.
Yeah, I know we talked about it on our last pod, but last but not least, NCAA championship starts September 21st to the 20th, or September. Geez, where's the date on here? The date's not on here, is it?
Thursday the 21st is Saturday.
The 21st. Oh, March 21st to 23rd of September. Dude, I am lost right now. It's October actually now. Jeez.
Yeah.
Months are flying by, but March 21st to the 23rd. Going down to Kansas City, Missouri this year, T-Mobile Center. Just go over your predictions again for the national champions. I know you listed them all last podcast, but let's just do it again for people that didn't listen.
Yeah, I mean, I think Haynes is definitely gonna be a national championship, or he's gonna win a national championship this year. I think that's gonna be like, if I had to pick one and bet my life on it, I'd bet Levi Haynes. Not gonna say that he doesn't have some tough competition in that weight class, because he does. But I see shades of David Taylor in him. I see, he had a disappointing loss in the finals as a freshman.
Mm-hmm.
I think he comes back as a sophomore with not necessarily a chip on his shoulder, but I think he got a lot better this offseason. And I think there is going to be a sizable gap between Levi Haynes and 95% of the kids at 157. Or I mean, I just feel that way. And he could even go 65, but who knows? Mm-hmm. Van Ness is another interesting one, because we're talking about a guy who was probably, I believe, 30 seconds away from knocking off Yanni Diakomahalis last year at Nationals, and just made one mistake, and it cost him. It cost him everything. I mean, Van Ness he obviously had some growing pains at the beginning of last year, but he ended up being, in my opinion, the person that made the most improvements over the course of the year, just because Haynes was always very solid. He won a lot of big matches. They were close. Mm-hmm. But Van Ness to come in and almost knock off Diakomahalis is huge. I mean, that was crazy. Bartlett's another one who I think he just needed. I mean, he said on podcasts and stuff like that, he just needed to get his mind right, and he needed to trust himself. And obviously that really paid off. I mean, he took third as well. Hopefully Robbie Howard's there. I think he's the most ideal solution at 25 this year, just because of all the hype around him. We're just really hoping he stays healthy this year, because I really think that if he's there, this is the most complete lineup that Penn State's had in a very long time. Very long time. Starachi's going to be the one. Actually, I'm going to take back my Levi Haynes prediction. I think he is going to be a national champion, but I'm actually going to put Carter Starachi at the top. I'm betting my life that he wins the national championship.
Smart.
Still somewhat speculative that he's coming back, but he says that he might go to MMA. I don't see that happening. He's got a chance to be I would imagine he'd wrestle before Brooks at Nationals, unless they do some kind of weird reverse thing that they've done in the past where they kind of scramble things around. But Carter Starachi has a chance to be Penn State's first 4-time national champion. I don't see him passing that up. Aaron Brooks, I don't think, would walk away from that either. And not that he's, put those kind of things out there, but we have Penn State's really they have a good opportunity to have like 6 or 7 finalists this year. In the past, they've had 5, and they've won 5. We're talking 6, maybe 6 or 7 this year. That's being very. That's not considering injuries. That's not considering upsets, because those things happen. But
of course,
in a perfect world, they have 6 or 7 in the finals this year, and I would expect at least 5 of them to be national champions. And I don't think the team race is going to be very close this year. I think the team race might be locked up by the semifinals. The team's just so solid, and with so many guys coming back, and Bartlett being a junior, Van Ness being a sophomore, Haynes being a sophomore, Starachi, Brooks, Kirk, all seniors. Nagal's young. I mean, we're talking about a lot of guys have done a lot of things at Nationals, and they're going to be around for a couple more years. It's going to be pretty insane this year. It's going to be very dominant, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've said it time and time again. This program is arguably the best program, best dynasty in college athletics, at least in the recent talk.
Yeah.
You can argue all time, I think, at this point, right?
Yeah, I mean, you think about some of the Iowa teams from like the Gable days. It's kind of tough to put Penn State ahead of them. I believe there actually was a year that Iowa had 10 finalists.
Okay. Maybe you never know. Maybe this will be the year for Penn State.
Yeah, maybe. I do believe there was a year Iowa had 10 finalists, but this team's up there, and the thing is I'm sort of biased, and I think that Penn State's 2014 team, if you were to put them up against this team, you're looking at some very good matchups. You're looking at Matt Brown, versus Carter Starachi. You're looking at Ed Ruth versus, I think Ed Ruth is at 97 that year. Ed Ruth versus Aaron Brooks. I mean, good God. I mean, there's some really good lineups. Well, on paper, this is the strongest lineup they've had since then. That's not an argument.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good debate. 2014. I might have to do a little article on that one. 2014 versus 2023, 24, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. And it's been 10 years, which is crazy, but
yeah, that's the crazy part. Yeah,
that's the really crazy part. It's been 10 years since that team's been there, but I mean, yeah, that would be an interesting one to put on paper. That would be kind of cool. Maybe with technology nowadays, we can see that.
Oh yeah, we could figure something out. Anyway, so there's not really much else to talk about with the schedule, but I do want to pick your brain a little bit. You kind of hinted at it before, but I know out of conference, there's Lehigh, Hofstra, Oregon State, and Edinburgh. Who would you want to personally see on? Obviously, they can't change this year's schedule, but next year's schedule as an out of conference matchup.
Honestly, what comes to mind to me is Missouri. I think I'd like to see Keegan O'Toole come to State College. I think a lot of people would like that. There's so much firepower. NC State's another one ranked extremely high. Iowa State's another one ranked extremely high. I wish we'd get some of the Ivy League schools in a duel. I wish we would have gotten Cornell 10 years ago. That would have been something. But I mean, it's just there's a lot of firepower in the Big Ten. You're almost blessed as a Penn State fan because you get to see them wrestle the best teams every year. But yeah, if I had to pick one, personally for me, I'd pick Missouri just because I'd like to see Keegan O'Toole. But I mean, there are better teams. NC State's ranked higher. Iowa State's ranked higher. Oklahoma State. Last time I wrestled Oklahoma State in a duel that wasn't the NWCA when Suriano got hurt was in Rec Hall, actually. And I was a student then, and I sat on the floor right next to the mat. And that was something because John Smith was like 10 feet from me. And he was complaining about calls one time. I've never heard that place get more upset. But yeah, imagine. I mean, I'm happy that they are wrestling some good out of conference teams, and not necessarily that Oregon State's a great team, but I think that just the fact that they're wrestling them is good for the sport, good for the organization, or good for the school's wrestling program.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious how. I know it doesn't really affect them too much, the changes in conference realignment next year, at least for wrestling specifically. But I'm just curious, like, do they go out and now go play wrestle or set up a match against like is Oregon State home and home? Do we know, or is it just like a one and done?
Is it what?
Is it a home and home? Like, are they going to come back to State College?
I would imagine if we wrestle them twice, we'd go out there twice. But I don't think they'll wrestle them twice.
True. So,
I mean, in the past, they wrestled Utah Valley, and that was a one and done thing. I'm trying to think of other kind of like.
I guess it's not really like football. It's a little different where they're just not like home. Like we have to agree on this. Like
right. I think that Penn State looks at wrestling as a sport that has a lot of potential to grow, and I don't think that they would be like, no, you guys got to come here now.
Yeah, that's true.
Who knows? But I don't see them wrestling Oregon State next year. But who knows? It could change. It could absolutely change.
Looking up and down the list, there's not a ton of interesting names. I guess you can go to some of the ACC schools, but if you're not wrestling Pitt, it's kind of like pointless, I guess.
Yeah, and that's something I think that they should probably consider doing in the future is getting Pitt back on the schedule.
I think that was. I mean, hell, all sports at this point. Like it's getting. I know they're localish, and you don't want to help them at all, but like,
right? And
why not? It brings Pennsylvania together. It's cool to watch.
Exactly. And I feel like Pennsylvania people, even I'm like this. We like to argue that Pennsylvania is the best wrestling state in the country.
Yeah. So
Jersey has an argument, and there's plenty of other states, but I just think that the Pitt-Penn State rivalry is kind of like a cool thing to take advantage of. Looking at 100%. NC State's roster, though, I don't think that it's any question that if I had to pick one, it would probably be them. Ed Scott versus Levi Haynes would be enough for me
Yeah.
So
yeah, no, it's tough. There's not really any notable names out there, I guess, but that they haven't wrestled recently, at least.
right,
But yeah,
pretty much everybody's in the conference, which is
that's
it's
true.
a blessing
too.
it's a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, for Penn State's perspective, it doesn't really hurt them whatsoever. But,
no, definitely doesn't. It just makes the reputation stronger, I guess.
Yeah, a couple nice warm-ups too before you get into postseason play. But anyway, any final thoughts? I know we went through the whole schedule. We went through projected Big Ten champs, projected NCAA champs. Anything else you got?
I don't think so. I'm looking forward to a good year, though. I've been at State College since last wrestling season, so I'm looking forward to going back. And wrestling season is here. It's the best time of the year.
Yeah, right around the corner. First match again. Journeyman Classic is November 12th, so we got about a little over a month. And
a little over a month.
Yeah, we're in the full swing of things again. So hopefully we could do some more of these. But in the meantime, guys, check us out on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all that other good stuff. If you don't already, subscribe below. It's easy, it's simple, it's free. It helps us out. So hit the subscribe button down below. Give us a like. Give us some comments, feedback. I'm open to anything. Who do you want on the wrestling schedule for next year out of conference? You can throw those in the comments. And, that's another episode of the Good Morning Happy Valley podcast. Signing off.